underground, 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 underground,
Greetings, surface dwellers. My name is Michael, and these are my chthonic musings. We continue to linger here in RPG a Day 2025, taking the next two prompts and examining them, seeing if we can divine some sort of meaning, some sort of insight. All right, my surface dwelling friends, today we are taking the prompts from RPG a Day 2025, number 16, Overcome, and 17, Renew, and fusing them together into a single concept. There's an old saying that nothing in life is certain except death and taxes, but we're going to see if there's a possibility in our games that one of these things can be overcome, and with a certain amount of renewal, we can reclaim what we thought was once lost. And if you think I'm talking about getting some of your tax money back, I'm sorry, I've got bad news for you. Back in the Holmes basic set of Dungeons & Dragons, first published in 1977, we are given the following advice. Most dungeon masters allow a player only one or perhaps two characters at a time. If a character is killed, then for the next game the player rolls a new character. The new character, of course, starts with no experience. A character may be allowed to designate a quote-unquote relative who will inherit his wealth and possessions after paying a 10% tax on his death or disappearance. There is no reason, however, why a character could not choose to quote-unquote retire wealthy and covered with glory and let some fresh, hot-blooded adventurer take the risk. When a character is killed, the lead figure, if used, representing his body, is removed from the table, unless it is eaten by the monsters or carried off by his comrades to be returned to his family. A 7th level cleric can raise the dead, if you can find one. Also, of course, wish rings and other magic can restore the deceased adventurer to his comrades and friends. So I have to say, first of all, that when we were kids, back in the day, in the late 70s, we didn't really play, rules as written. We removed the lead figures from the table, even if the character was eaten by monsters or carried off to be returned to his family. But I want to focus a little bit on the last part about how in this game for 1st to 3rd level characters, it's talking about 7th level clerics raising the dead, or maybe you can get a wish ring or other magic to restore your deceased adventurer. It's kind of odd and a little interesting, and I think it's part of what put ideas into our heads about maybe this death thing isn't the obstacle it's meant to be portrayed as. And also, while we're on the topic, I'll also bring up the 1980 basic rule set by Tom Moldvay, which gives us a little bit of of a clarification to, perhaps rein in some of our shenanigans. Inheritance. If the DM wishes, a player may name an heir to inherit his or her worldly possessions upon the death of the character. The local authorities will, of course, take 10% in taxes before giving the inheritance to the heir. This heir must always be a newly rolled up first-level character. This quote-unquote inheritance should only occur once per player. So I'd like to talk briefly about resurrection, broadly the concept, including spells of that name and other spells of other names that are essentially the same thing, and items and what have you. And within this topic, I'm going to focus on like three different concepts or categories. The cost to the caster for doing this resurrection, the cost to the formerly deceased for enduring this ordeal, transitioning from death back to life, and the conditions and uncertainty of this entire process. So let's start with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, First Edition. And there's a lot of things going on here, and I have no doubt that I'm not covering everything, but there's enough to discuss as it is. First of all, we have the 5th level cleric spell, Raise Dead. Then the minimum level of a cleric to be able to cast 5th level spells is 9. You have to be a 9th level cleric. We're given a couple of conditions for being for the deceased to be eligible to be raised by this spell. One's pretty straightforward. They can be dead no longer than 1 day per cleric level. So if you're at the minimum level, 9th level cleric, that would be somebody that's been dead for no more than 9 days. Another condition is that this spell specifically lists that it can restore life to a dwarf, gnome, half-elf, halfling, or human. Conspicuously absent from this list are the legitimate player character races of elves and half-orcs. Interestingly, the higher level spell of resurrection will reference Raise Dead, the spell, for its conditions of who who's eligible to be raised. It changes the time period that they can be dead for, but it kind of leaves the racial component as is, and yet the Rod of Resurrection, which supposedly, is like the resurrection spell, says the following. This rod enables the cleric to resurrect the dead, even elven, dwarven, gnome, or halfling, as if he or she were high enough level to cast the spell. Well, that's interesting because dwarves, gnomes, and halflings weren't a question. It adds elves, so that's good. And half-orcs are still off the menu here. But not really, because the number of charges that you need for a Rod of Resurrection, it depends upon the class and the race of the deceased. And half-orcs are on this list. So make it make sense. I don't know. They do have the highest cost, though, of number of charges. Now going back to Raise Dead, there is a special con save for the raised person. So this would be a cost, both a condition and a cost to the formerly deceased. We can see in the Constitution table towards the beginning of the player's handbook where the abilities are explained, because heaven forbid everything should be in a one place for you to put this all together. There is a maximum number of times that any character can be raised from the dead or resurrected, equal to their initial Constitution score. So whatever it was at character creation, even if the Constitution varies after that, and we'll get to a little bit more about that later, the initial Constitution score puts a limit on how many times you can come back. This limit, however, does not apply to wishes. In addition, as a condition, based on your constitution, the deceased's constitution, there is a resurrection survival percentage, which I think it called a save before, but it's not treated as a normal saving throw. This is a percentage you roll at the time that the raised dead or resurrection is performed, and you'll have somewhere between a 40% chance of surviving resurrection if your constitution is 3, up to 100% if it's 18. And just for reference, somebody that is average with a 10 constitution would have a 75% chance of surviving resurrection. If this percentage roll fails, then that character is completely and totally dead forever. And finally, there is a rule that each such revivification reduces the character's constitution score by 1. So that is a cost to the formerly deceased. And another cost to the recently resurrected person from the spell, well, I should say raised person, because we're talking about raised dead, is that they need 1 day of full bed rest per day spent dead. And one last little twist on this spell is that it can be used on non-skeleton undead. So if your character or somebody's character was, let's say, level drained and turned into a wight, casting Raised Dead will undo that and return them back to the living, with all the other costs, involved of having a Raised Dead placed on you. But that's interesting because there are other cases, other spells in other editions that undead are just off the table. You can't use Raised Dead or Resurrection on them. And finally, I'll note in the Dungeon Master's Guide for AD&D First Edition, there is a list of clerical spells that non-player character clerics could be casting on the players, and kind of a price list for it. And under Raised Dead, it says 1,000 gold pieces plus 500 gold pieces per level of the cleric casting the spell. So that would put it at a minimum of 9 times 500 plus 1,000, or 4,500 gold pieces. The spell Resurrection is a 7th level cleric spell, and it ups the time that the deceased can be dead up to 10 years per cleric level, and the minimum level of cleric to be able to cast 7th level spells is 16 in AD&D First Edition. So we're talking about a minimum of 160 years that they can go back and resurrect somebody. And for that, after the casting, the caster needs 1 day of bed rest per level of resurrected person. So that's a cost to the caster. And we might have missed, but in an entirely different section in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there is a list of certain spells and activities that will unnaturally age the caster of such magic. And lo and behold, resurrection is on that table. So casting the resurrection spell will also age the caster 3 years. And so I'll note here that in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, if you're following those rules, that you'll be keeping track of each player character's age, and the Dungeon Master may have already rolled to see what the maximum age is, at which point that character would die of natural causes or die of old age, so to speak. So depending on how many of these events that artificially age you, and encounters with ghosts that may be aging you, and I can't even remember all of the other things, but that could be pushing you into different age brackets, which could change your ability scores. You could be becoming a little bit enfeebled by older age. And if you hit that limit, raised deads and resurrections are not going to help you, because it'll simply return you back to the point where you will be alive, but you've exceeded your natural age, and you will simply die again. Now there's another path outside of the clerical spells for returning the deceased to the living, and that is both druids and magic users each have their own version of a reincarnation spell. For druids, this is a 7th level spell, which means that the minimum caster level is 12th level, which brings us in within AD&D. Druids only go up to 14th level, and the last 3 levels, starting with 12th level, there are a limited number of druids of that level, period. So if you are a 12th level druid, that means you are one of a maximum of 9 druids in existence with that level. At 13th level, there are only 4 archdruids, and there's only one 14th level druid, the Great Druid. So we're not messing around here. We're the 7th level druidic spell. The maximum time for the person to be deceased and still eligible for a reincarnation is 1 week. And the druids have a different table of what kind of body the essence of the deceased will reappear in. The table has a number of different entries, including things like elf, gnome, and human, but it also has things such as centaur, dryad, faun, pixie, as well as badger, eagle, fox, hawk, owl, raccoon, wolf, and so forth. Under the spell description, it says any sort of player character can be reincarnated. If an elf, gnome, or human is indicated, the character must be created. Doesn't really specifically say what to do if any of the other entries are made, but seems kind of odd that this level spell would produce results that most of the entries, and therefore, more likely than not, by far, that you would you would be reincarnated as a creature that is no longer playable. And just a little bit of my own personal history in my very first AD&D campaign. I did have somebody that died, and she was reincarnated. And I don't really know what kind of justification I gave for a relatively low-level character being reincarnated by such a high-level druid, but I do remember it happening. And she came back as a faun, and that was close enough that I, figured something out, and she continued to play for quite a long time with that character. The magic user version of this reincarnation spell is a 6th level spell, which for a magic user means that they would also be a minimum 12th level. They, however, have different tables where all of the reincarnations are of some sort of humanoid. This table includes dwarf, elf, gnome, half-elf, halfling, half-orc, and human, so all of the player races are accounted for. But it also has entries such as bugbear, gnoll, goblin, hobgoblin, orc, and troll. So again, even here, I guess we're meant to assume that these, if this entry comes up with one of these, humanoid, monster races, so to speak, that they would not be eligible to be player characters. Or at least I'd have to wait for a couple of later editions. Maybe at least 3rd edition D&D before they can come back into play. And let's wrap up our AD&D spells with an interesting and somewhat bizarre one. The 8th level magic user spell, Clone, which I'll kind of, I'm bringing it up here because in some ways it's kind of a pre-resurrection. An 8th level spell means that you're a minimum of a 16th level magic user. And what this spell does is it creates a duplicate of a person. Here, I'm thinking in terms of the magic user themselves, but this spell is not limited to that. But so it creates a duplicate. The duplicate is it's complete to the level of experience, memories, etc. However, the duplicate is the person, so that if the original and a duplicate exists at the same time, each knows of the other's existence, and the original person and the clone will each desire to do away with the other, for such an alter ego is unbearable to both. So this is a really bizarre spell, at least in this version of D&D. And I should note that the clone takes 2 to 8 months to grow from the time the spell is cast. So that's why I'm bringing it up as like kind of a possible resurrection spell, because if a magic user takes some portion of their flesh as the material component and creates a clone, knowing that it's going to take 2 to 8 months to grow, and then they go out, on some sort of dangerous adventure. If they perish, then they will, assuming nothing happens to the clone, when the clone is done growing, then they will be there. They become the magic user because they are the same person. There could be, some equipment loss, but they'll have all of the same memories and abilities that they had at the time they cast the spell. If the magic user doesn't perish, then they need to get back and stop this experiment and do away with the clone before it comes into full form. Otherwise, we've got like a Stephen King situation going on or something. All right, let's move forward a few decades and talk a little bit about 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. We have a number of the same spells, but a little bit more lenient and lower level spells with therefore earlier access. From the minimum required level of the cleric or the druid or magic user. And there is also a common theme here of the material component. Diamonds. Most of the spells that we talked about in 1st edition AD&D, their counterparts in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons require diamonds as the material component of the spell, which is used up by casting the spell. Raise Dead, Resurrection, Clone, and even an additional spell called Revivify. The Reincarnate spell does have material components but they're not diamonds. It's rare oils and unguents. So let's briefly discuss these spells, and we'll order them by their diamond cost from lowest to highest, and then finish up with Reincarnate. So we'll lead off with this Revivify spell. It is a 3rd level necromancy spell, available to clerics of 5th level or above, or paladins of 9th level and above. The diamond cost is a diamond worth at least 300 gold pieces, and it's a pretty brief and simple spell. You touch a creature that has died within the last minute. That creature returns to life with 1 hit point. The spell can't return to life a creature that has died of old age, nor can it restore any missing body parts. At the cost of a 500 gold piece diamond, we have Raise Dead, a 5th level necromancy spell. And so for these we have a minimum caster level of a 9th level cleric or a 17th level paladin. The deceased can be dead for no longer than 10 days. It's just a flat 10 days. It cannot return an undead creature to life. This spell specifically calls that out. It also doesn't restore missing body parts. And also, coming back from the dead is an ordeal. The target takes a -4 penalty to all attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks. Every time the target finishes a long rest, the penalty is reduced by 1 until it disappears. So this is kind of, similar to the, okay, you're going to need 4 days of bed rest, but rather than the old school of just putting somebody completely out of commission, it does it by just applying a penalty and then reducing that penalty as as the character takes long rests. With a 1,000 gold piece diamond and a cleric that can cast 7th level spells, which means that they'd be at least 13th level in this version of the game. We can restore a dead creature that has been dead for no more than a century, that didn't die of old age, and that it isn't undead. If its soul is free and willing, the target returns to life with all its hit points. This version will restore missing body parts, but it's also an ordeal. The same deal as Raised Dead, a -4, which decreases by 1 after each long rest. And also, casting the spell to restore life to a creature that has been dead for 1 year or longer taxes you greatly, you being the caster. Until you finish a long rest, you can't cast spells again, and you have disadvantage on all attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. Also costing a 1,000 gold piece diamond, but also 2,000 gold pieces worth of a vessel that has a sealable lid and is large enough to hold a medium creature, and 1 cubic inch of the flesh of the creature that is to be cloned. We have the 8th level necromancy spell Clone, which is on the wizard spell list. This in many ways mirrors the first edition AD&D spell, with some notable exceptions. Instead of the 2 to 8 months, we have it grows to full size and maturity inside of this vessel after 120 days. You can also choose to have the clone be a younger version of the same creature. So not only can we make a backup version of ourselves, we can choose for that backup version to be a younger version of ourselves, but still have all of the abilities that we have now. That's pretty sweet. And it says here, at any time after the clone matures, if the original creature dies, its soul transfers to the clone, provided that the soul is free and willing to return. The clone is physically identical to the original and has the same personality, memories, and abilities, but none of the original's equipment. If the original creature's physical remains, if they still exist, become inert and can't thereafter be restored to life, since the creature's soul is elsewhere. So you don't have to worry about missing body parts, and even if you're disintegrated, you simply return back to wherever your clone is kept and start over again. So that's kind of why I consider this as like a preemptive resurrection spell. Alright, so as I mentioned before, the reincarnate spell does not require diamonds. Instead, it's rare oils and unguents worth at least 1,000 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. It is a 5th level transmutation spell, which can be cast by druids of 9th level or greater. You touch a dead humanoid or a piece of a dead humanoid. Provided that the creature has been dead for no longer than 10 days, the spell forms a new body for it and then calls the soul to enter that body. This table lists only and all of the player character races from the player's handbook. There's no question that your new character, this new body, is going to be playable. I mean, even if you come back as a dark elf or a tiefling or a dragonborn, everybody's accepted, so it doesn't matter. You just have to perhaps, change your racial modifications, and everything else stays the same, and you're good to go and keep going. And before we move on from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, I just want to mention the adventure Tomb of Annihilation that came out for this version of D&D. And the premise is basically that there's something called a death curse. And anybody that has been previously dead and then brought back is subject to this death curse. And their like maximum hit points decrease by 1 every day. So eventually they will, after some period of time, they will reach 0 and be permanently dead. Also, all of these types of magics that we've been talking about, raised dead and resurrection and so forth, cease to function, across the entire world. And in fact, they said, like, even if somebody, plane shifts to go to another plane of existence or world, it doesn't save them. They're still subject to this curse. So the player characters in this adventure are brought to Cholt, the tropical island, and where the curse is believed to have originated, and they're set on a quest, with a very real time clock, because people are withering away, and these people are the rich and powerful that have been able to afford, resurrections in the past. Including, I think there's like the one patron that you have is like a former adventurer, and she's, wasting away, and the people, the clerics don't know how much time she has. But obviously there's time enough to do like wacky dinosaur racing at the beginning of the adventure. But other than that, it's time to get serious and find a cure for this death curse. And I almost missed this one last spell. Maybe there's more that I missed, but there's a spell called True Resurrection, which is a 9th level cleric spell, and it requires a 25,000 gold piece diamond and a sprinkle of holy water. This can restore a dead creature from no longer than 200 years and died for any reason except old age. You get fully restored any organs or limbs. If the creature was undead, it is restored to its non-undead form. And the spell can even provide a new body if the original one no longer exists. Unless you are old. I don't know. It's kind of wacky. Here's a suggestion. Just find a wizard and have him clone your body. and you can even get a little bit younger, and you don't have to worry about this true resurrection nonsense. You can probably also save yourself a lot of money. All right, on to some current and in many ways simpler games as far as it comes to resurrection. We'll start with Dragonbane. Dragonbane has one spell, Resurrection, that's applicable, and the casting time is a shift. Now in Dragonbane, a shift is 6 hours. So there are 4 shifts in a day. You can channel nature's forces to resurrect a dead body, not as undead but truly alive. This costs the mage 1 point of willpower permanently and reduces maximum willpower points by 1. The more time that has passed since the target died, the more difficult it is. Within the same shift requires power level 1, within a day requires power level 2, and within a week requires power level 3. If over a week has passed, the body is too decomposed to be resurrected. Only one attempt can be made. If it fails, the victim is permanently dead. A person brought back to life loses D3 skill levels in all charisma-based skills to a minimum of 3. Okay, so the power levels, it sounds dramatic, but it's rather insignificant. It really just means how much willpower it's going to cost you to cast the spell. And, imagine if you've got the time to be doing the spell and casting time as a shift, so you're doing it for 6 hours, you've got plenty of willpower. That's not really the issue. So basically anybody up to a week that's been dead, that's the condition. The costs, however, are fairly significant. I mean, it's not a small thing to be losing a point of your own willpower, and decreasing your own attribute, and correspondingly, willpower points. So, that's the energy that you're using to power your spells and other abilities. The person that's being brought back from the dead will be losing, some skill points in their charisma-based skills. So they can train them, back up again. So that's a little bit of a setback. And the fact that only one attempt can be made. So, even at the highest... I should mention, this is an animism spell. So the school of animism. So even at the highest levels of the animism skill of 18, you still have a 10% chance of failure. And if you're less than that, because once somebody fails, you don't want somebody that just is beginning to learn magic to be casting this spell, because they fail and that's it. Because the restriction is on the person brought back to life. It says the victim is permanently dead. So you want a fairly competent person to be the one performing the spell. And that's it for Dragonbane. Daggerheart also has just one spell, also called Resurrection, and you make a spellcast roll with need a 20 as your, I forget what they call it, target number. It's like difficulty class, but I think they call it a target number. But anyhow, you need a 20 or better. On a success, restore one creature who has been dead no longer than 100 years to full strength. And then this is interesting. Then roll a d6. On a result of 5 or lower, place this card in your vault permanently. And that means you never cast the spell again. So it's very likely, what is that, like 83.3% that you cast a spell. If it's successful, that's it. That's the one and only time you're going to be casting the spell. So that's kind of interesting. On a failure, so if you don't make that 20, you can't cast Resurrection again for a week. So Yeah, that's a little bit of a limitation, but if you fail, it's not like spell's gone forever. Um, so that's interesting. Oh, I also should say that this is a level 10 spell, and I think that corresponds to spell levels and the character levels that they correspond. So this is for the highest, and character level 10 is the cap for Daggerheart. So this is for the highest level characters. There's also a section in the rulebook under death or resurrection. It says it is possible to resurrect a dead character, though it's often a long, difficult, and costly process. If a party decides to take this path upon a character's death, the GM details the steps the party must take to complete the resurrection. But that section is not in the SRD, and I think there are parts of Daggerheart that, depending on your playstyle, you can just kind of ignore, because I mean it doesn't affect any of the other mechanics, so it's not like the game structure is going to fall apart. So I think that is entirely based on your game. If you want to have some sort of ritual or pilgrimage or whatever that's possible and put that out there, that's fine. But I don't think it's required. And finally, we come to Shadow Dark, which has the novel idea that we can overcome character death by simply accepting it and making up a new character. And so here's what Shadow Dark has to say about character death. Character deaths will happen, especially among zero-level adventurers. The dice can be fickle, and crawlers sometimes get into more trouble than they can handle down in the Shadow Dark. When a character dies due to the player's choices, and it makes sense, it was a just death. If there is uncertainty, did you remember to add your Constitution modifier to your death timer? Clarify, and then let fate fall. A game world without death is one without risk or tension. And so, until I resurface, may your successes be many and your failures be memorable.